Welcome to the Create the Life You Want podcast, where we break down the journey of people just like you going from dream to ownership in business acquisitions, franchises, and startups. I'm your host, Jeremy Ames. Today's episode is brought to you ad-free by Guidant Financial. Guidant is America's leading company helping aspiring entrepreneurs use retirement funds to buy or start businesses. If you're committed to buying or starting a business, you can find out more about your funding options by going to www.guidantfinancial.com. That's Guidant financial.com. Now, let's get started with the show. Welcome, everyone, to the Create the Life You Want podcast. I am Jeremy Ames, and today I am joined by Robb Loman. Robb has been in the National Guard. He's worked in logistics for the Pitney Bowes and Netflix of the world. We're going to get to find a little bit about what in his path led him to ultimately become a franchisee, a franchise owner. So, Robb, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Robb, you mentioned to me when we were talking just a few minutes ago that there was a pivot point for you that happened that made you decide that you needed to take more control of your future. So maybe you could back up and give us just a little background on what you did before you decided business ownership was a path you wanted to look at, and then we can take that to the pivot point where you decided to think about something different.
Yeah, sure thing. So the biggest thing for me is probably the past, really almost the past decade, I've been in manufacturing in the auto industry, tier one manufacturing. So manufacturing exhaust systems for the F-150 or structural parts we did for the Cadillac, some of those different companies. But my jobs are always so dependent on the economy and where I was at. And there's been several times where, my whole shift was cut out just because the vehicle was either at the end of its life cycle or it just wasn't selling well. And there's just kind of the instability that went on with that. And really, it just kind of got to the point where I really felt it was time. Like I needed to take control of my own future. It's, always looked at kind of chasing that American dream of owning my own business. I think that's one of the exciting things I've always looked at, but that was really, I think the last job where my shift got cut out, and I was laid off was really kind of the turning point where like, it's really time that I need to take control over this and, really focus on my future, not just for me, but for my family too. Right. So,
Yeah.
as you go up the management structure, those jobs are fewer and fewer and more competitive. So, I really wanted to, know that I had some control of what was going to go on in my life and be able to, provide really the life I want for my family and myself.
So the Netflix Pitney Bowes were earlier in your career,
Yeah.
and then somehow you pivoted to more of manufacturing, and it
Mhm.
sounds like had several experiences where you thought things were going well, and then some external factor that had nothing to do with how great you were at your job inserted itself and destabilized what you were trying to do financially and for your family.
Yeah, I mean, it was an interesting role. Pitney Bowes Management Services was great. It was just on the backside of its life cycle. They've mainly focused on mail for large organizations, and I had a really great boss, Angela Menzies, back in the day. She's the one that actually convinced me to go back to school. Because while I was doing really great and moving up the chain there and into management, at the end of the day, you know, uh, as that business was slowing down and then getting towards the end of its life cycle. Um, you know, transferable skills and having a degree was a big thing that other employers were going to look for. And she convinced me to go back to school. And that's kind of the turning point. And when I kind of came out of that, it was also a turning point with me in the military and becoming an officer. There was just this weird time in transition and came back and I got into manufacturing because, it was something I thought I'd really enjoy. And I did because I get to be hands-on. I enjoy working with the crews, but I enjoy making things and seeing the product. And it's very quickly do you see, all right, I see a bottleneck here. I can fix this problem. We make you make a process and a resolution and you immediately see a change in efficiency improvement or improvement of the quality or, of the job of the individual gets, improved for the employee, those kind of things. It's immediate results. I just really enjoyed that aspect of it.
Yeah, and the physical product sounds like was a
Yeah.
big part of it too. Um, Robb, where did the entrepreneurial dream come from? You said that had been in the back of your mind for a while. Is there something in your background or your childhood or something that led to that, or was it a gradual?
I mean, I don't know that I can necessarily point to. I wasn't the kid that always had the lemonade stand, and I was
Yeah.
trying to run the lawn mowing business. You know, I did some of those things, but not necessarily. I was really focused on athletics when I was younger, and really through a little while after high school. But um, it's one of those things that, especially when I left high school, I didn't have a whole lot of direction and got in the workforce, and just realized that at the end of the day, a lot of this wasn't really finding me what my calling on what I wanted to do. And the more some of those aspects of me came out and some of the great mentors that I've had over my life, you know, really realizing that for me to really implement my vision and the things that I want to do, I really needed to take greater control over things and just kind of really did start looking down that road. It's one of those things I always saw as kind of the pie in the sky kind of thing of having my own business. Like, I'm not walking around with, $2 million to throw at a McDonald's franchise.
Yeah.
And, I was developing skills as I grew and I worked with my employers and some great mentors, but I knew I didn't have what I needed necessarily to start a business at the scale that I thought it had to be. And it wasn't really till, really getting tired of the grind and everything that goes on with being somebody else's employee. Um,
Yeah.
I started just kind of doing some more research and then all of a sudden realized that this was something that I could do. I kind of ran into a career mentor coach, um, and really kind of helped work me down that path to realize that, this wasn't some crazy dream, that it was actually, achievable for me. And kind of led me down the road, which actually helped connect me with guiding it and made all that possible.
Yeah, let's dig into the career mentor coach because I think what
Yeah.
you're saying, Rob, will resonate with a lot of people that they may have this dream of business ownership, but they haven't maybe done the work or built the clarity to understand how in on
Yeah.
earth they could make this jump from what they've been doing to that. So, what was the process like with this career mentorship coach, and what were maybe a couple examples of the things that you did with this coach that really made a change for you where you thought, "Oh, I can see it now."
Yeah. No, absolutely. One of the things I met with her, and I kind of knew what she did and what she was doing, and when you first meet and talk about this, because the whole idea is still way above your head. You're like, okay, sure, like, I'll go down this path. Like, and she's like, I've got a process for you. Um, I just really want you to stick to this process. Just follow it. You're gonna think it's crazy, um, but it will lead you to where you want to go. And I'm like, you know what? All right, fine, absolutely. Well, let's see where this road goes, right? And it started with basically outside the initial consultations and us kind of talking through where I'm at in my life right now. You do a personality test, and then she kind of linked me up, and we started meeting with some franchises. And one of the things I was really looking at with the franchise, because I've looked at several other things myself, right? And I've been lower level management, but I've never been the C-level executive that has dealt with those pieces. So in operations, I'm a little bit arrogant, and I think you know everything because you got to deal with everybody. But I'm at least smart enough to know that there's a lot of things I don't know what I don't know yet. And for me, I was kind of turned on to the idea of a franchise ultimately because it was buying an education process for me, essentially. You've got a process that works. Um, you've got a roadmap and an outline and a group that's going to help you. There's a much higher success rate with them. So, like, I do have other ideas down the road that I want to maybe take into a business that maybe another 5 years from now is kind of in that game plan. But right now, getting into the franchise was that education that I was buying, right? Was buying into in the process, and something that was going to be a return on my investment in that education. So she had taken me down. I had looked at several different franchises that kind of met with my personality, kind of with where I was at, and kind of with the funding that I was going to be able to afford. Things I didn't even think I would have been able to do. Um, she kind of helped work me through that and helped connect me so some really really great people and realized that that dream of owning my own business wasn't as far fetched as it was. In fact, it was actually more achievable than I really thought it was. So
Yeah, so you're an operations rock star. You know that. you start looking at some of these non-franchise opportunities and you think, ooh, okay, well, technology or
Yeah.
sales or marketing, I'm not sure I
Yeah.
know those pieces. And so is that my understanding right that you said,
Yeah.
oh, well,
Marketing is a challenge. Like Generation X, right? Like I had stereotypical. I've avoided social media most of my life because I didn't grow up with it or need it. My
yep.
friends are a phone call away, or I know who they are, right?
When you talk to
Um,
people on the phone,
yeah,
you just
still,
you just dated yourself, Rob.
very much so. Yeah, I still had a phone that was corded when I grew up for most of it. We thought we were all fancy when we had cordless home phones,
Oh, those
but
are the best.
yeah, I grew up in the Ozarks, so I'm kind of a country boy. Growing up, I've been in the city for about I moved to Kansas City like 20 years ago, so I'm kind of split now, but I still claim some of my roots that I came from. So, but yeah,
So you decide, hey, franchise is probably the right first start. So I love what you said because I think this is you're already having in your head, hey, this franchise is really my starter business. This is what's
yeah,
going to allow me to get in here and learn this sort of new skill set. I know I can crush the operational side, so give me a playbook, and that will be my opportunity to learn some of the other components of sales and marketing or whatever that make the business go. Is that,
yes, yeah, absolutely. And the franchise gives you a team that way, right?
yeah,
So, one of the things I just put together a whole new flyer that I'm getting ready to use to change marketing. I give a rough outline of kind of what my vision is that it should look like. And then we have another member on our team, Jordan. She's great with that stuff. I send it to her and I'm like, hey, jazz this up a bit for me if you would, right? Like help, make this look like a finished product that is something we would be proud to give to our customers. And, you know, um, being part of a franchise gives you that. Where doing that myself, I don't have that resource, or I'm looking and I'm having to pay somebody a whole different situation to do that. So
yeah, it's an
um,
interesting point
that's
you're
been really
making
great.
with the
Yeah,
franchise model that you're in. Even when you're first starting and you're small and don't have a lot of other employees, you've still got
yeah,
access to some resources that are more specialized to help you.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it gives me a lot more support that I wouldn't have otherwise, for sure.
Got it. So you do a personality test with this career coach. You get aligned with this idea that, hey, franchise is probably the right first start for me. Now, walk me through the process of how you decide what franchise is the one that you want to start with.
Sure. And so that's another thing. Like I had to promise her, like, hey, I will go through the whole process with each one because there's a process you go to when starting a franchise, where you're going to meet the team. You're going to go through the FDD, which is the governing document that is the legal contract between you and the franchisor over how that you operate and work together. You kind of work with them, make sure it's a good fit, understand how they operate. Um, so I did that, and she set me up with three companies. And honestly, the first one that she get, or the first time she talked about Home Smiles, I wasn't really jumping out of my seat for. I'm like, okay, I've done all this stuff before, like you know. But I went through the process with them. I went to three other companies where I sat down. I talked with their management team. I talked with them about how they structure their business and how they operate. How they generate revenue. I mean, one of them was really just pretty much a league aggregator, and then they subbed out all the work, which, really kind of turned me off from that because that's not what I want to do, right? I enjoy having employees and developing and helping them grow, not just my business, but operationally. So
Yep.
not being able to do that told me that wasn't the right company for me. But when I sit down and I talked with the Home Smiles management team and Jess Love, who's the founder, I really kind of fell more in love with Home Smiles and what they do and how they operate. And I really, really believed in the team and what they did. And, I had several meetings with them. I had several meetings with the larger group in which we operate with. And at the end of the day, it turned out just to be, I really felt it was the best move for us. They were the most invested in my success and in the growth. And they
Yeah.
themselves were, they'd been around for 7 years at that point, but they had just decided to go into expansion. They'd started slow their first 7 years, only adding one or two franchises a year kind of thing. And so when I came on, it was exciting to see that I would also have the opportunity to help develop this franchise
Yeah.
and bring it into the Midwest and make the changes that are necessary for us here. So, um, it was just, it really kind of all started piecing together and fitting with, my personality, what I like, what they were doing, because I also think it's a product that we offer that is truly there to help people and help protect them and their investments. And I just wasn't peddling something that was useless and of no value, which I definitely can't get behind that, right? I need
Yeah.
something that I can internally believe in and is important to what I do, that helps me get out of the bed in the morning and want to do what I do, and help the other people, right? Help my customers.
Yeah. So I'm hearing two things in this. One, it was really important to you to go through the process, meet the people, and it was really the people that you connected with, right? Because those are the ones that are
Oh,
going to be providing you the support. But I want to take a step back because when you talked
okay.
about the league aggregator, it made me think you had already decided what industry you wanted to be in. And if that's the case, maybe we should back up and talk about how you arrived at that conclusion.
So actually, there were some big differences in the industries I did look at.
Okay.
The home
Let's talk about
services
those.
industries now, like a couple of more home services, and that's stuff I'm comfortable with. It's stuff that's hands-on, which is obviously the kind of thing that I enjoy, right? Um, Growing up in the country, you do all the stuff that yourself, right? So it's just kind of the natural, um, for me to already have a strong basis and knowledge of that. A couple other were helping with fitness and things that would, align with my past long ago. But um, a lot of them were home services, and that's just things that it's something I knew I enjoyed. It's something I knew I had in background. I've not necessarily been in construction, but I have done a lot with my own homes. I help other people with their homes. It was something that did kind of fit in with my background and my personality. I've Pitney Bowes, one of the you always have your core services. One of the offshoots was I worked with another company where I helped them with their project management with building out new office spaces because we helped them with their facility management. So I kind of got sucked into that, and I knew I really kind of enjoyed that aspect of it too. So
Yeah.
it's just weird how I have a really kind of diverse background. We've kind of scratched the surface on, but it's brought a lot of these things together, and it really does kind of help. This kind of brought a lot of things home for me into things that I enjoy. Um,
Was it important to you to find a business model where you felt comfortable and understood the underlying work? Because that's kind of what I'm hearing from you. Like you wanted to be able to
yeah,
say, hey, yeah, I want employees, but I want to know what I'm talking
yeah.
about when I'm working with them.
Oh, absolutely. And I think, I looked at some others, and it's things that if I have no background in it and nothing that I want to do, like I don't conceptualize the work well with that. So I'm not trying to figure out how to reinvent the wheel for myself and then turn around and create and drive a business off of that, you know. And it's one of those things too. It's like when I go and talk to new potential clients, right? I want to be having confidence in saying that I know what I'm doing and I'm coming to do the things that I say that I'm going to do. I want to provide the service ultimately that I'm saying that I'm going to do. Um, if I was going to go tell them, you know, uh, you know, I'm going to go make widgets for you of something I've never done before. I couldn't speak to confidence to that. I couldn't say that I have a strong background in that. And it would, to me, I feel it would take me longer to get up to speed and to offer something where, it was important to me. Like I did want to do something I was familiar with and comfortable with and something that I knew I would enjoy, instead of just something entirely different out of the blue. And now not only am I figuring out am I going to enjoy this whole new industry or not, or and then try to turn it into my business. It kind of took that factor out of it for me and helped make me more comfortable with making that decision for sure.
Yeah, and it sounds like it also helped you think about spending more of your time on sales because that wasn't any of the particular roles that you held in the past, but something that you have to do a little bit of as a business owner helped you feel a little more confident to know that what you were selling and connecting with people on was something you knew and understood and had a background that you could speak to credibly.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like I am not the car salesman. I'm not the background of that. I struggle with that, and not that's just one analogy to use. But when you got to go talk to a customer, and I've got to, my sales really come more from developing a relationship with them than trying to sell a product.
Yeah, you're trying
Um,
to help.
yeah, right. I want to help and create something that's useful and value to them. You know. So if I can't do that, then to me I'm in the wrong industry right now. So I needed to find that and connect with that, and it was going to help me lead to ways that I could um, overcome the other things I need to do with sales and the other things and creating those relationships instead of trying to relearn an entirely new skill set I had no clue about.
Yeah. So you have a good feeling from the Home Smiles team, and so you decide this is probably the one. What kind of other due diligence did you do? I know they provide the franchise disclosure document. There's financials in there, and there's information so you can contact other franchisees. So tell us
Yeah.
what you did to validate, hey, I think this is the right opportunity for me.
Yeah, so absolutely. So I did. I reached out to several other franchisees. Um, really started to get the landscape of how, and I spent a lot of time. Like it was nice that I got to sit there and talk with the ownership group at the time, um, and really understand how they worked. Obviously, I wanted to make a connection and relationship with them with all of this, and knew where they were at and what their ultimate goals were going to be. But then I needed to reach out to the other franchises and make sure that you know that they're successful, right? If you could have 50 franchises out there, but if none of them are successful, then it's not a good business model to work off of. I understood the concept of the business model, but I needed to make sure that I also understood that the support was there to make us successful. Um, because looking at preventative home maintenance from a holistic standpoint is almost really like developing a whole new industry right now. Because that's not really how people search and look for things. They may look for gutter cleaning or window cleaning individually, but we're helping homeowners and multifamily property managers look at it as a holistic approach and taking care and making sure everything is done. So, with us looking to shift to that kind of a concept, I did spend a lot of time researching how well that is going, how that transition actually looks, the parts of the country that it was successful in, because their homes are very different to ours, so that we did have to have a little bit of a difference in the process, right?
Yeah.
Um, it started out like the Bay Area in San Francisco and kind of parts in Texas. Those are all what you call like slab on grade homes. There's nobody with a basement. All their utilities that and all of their essential components for the home are located very differently in the home. They operate very differently. So it's like, can we make those changes and make this really successful here? And the other part of it is too, um, you know, if you look, the cost of a home here in the business model is very different here in Kansas City in the Midwest than it is over in San Francisco Bay Area.
Yep.
Their economy is completely different. A home here that's, a $300,000 home is a $1 million home in the Bay Area. So you're talking about working with individuals with completely different revenue,
Budgets.
incomes for the family. So as we transition and brought that to the Midwest, we're obviously changing the pricing model here. And I
Yep.
needed to know that that pricing model could still be successful here in the Midwest and provide what I needed to for the customer. So,
Well, two things that brings up in my mind. One is one of the things that drew you to this franchise that it was home services, but it sounds like more of a subscription based business than just a, hey, when something breaks, you call us, and so we're constantly doing transactional sales.
yeah. So it's a little bit of a paradigm shift going on right now with the company. Initially, it was, the one of our kind of slogans was, one click, one call, and it's done. So we'd come out one time a year, get all of your annual maintenance done for you. And especially in kind of where those homes were at, that's another reason why this became really important for me and one of my big goals this year. It works well in those parts of the country. But when you start getting in the Midwest and you have so much of a drastic difference between seasons, you know,
Yeah.
um, we needed to do things during a certain time of year. It's really important. So if you're here and you're not doing your gutters until August, well, you're eight
Problem.
months behind. 8 months, your gutter's been clogged and it's affecting your foundation, right?
Yep.
Um, so we've got a couple different ways we're handling this. I'm kind of putting together and piloting a seasonal type package. Where obviously the individual service we can bring the price down. That way I can bring it down to a price point that's more reasonable, but then I'm able to do services that are more appropriate for time of the year. And there's
Yeah.
other things that are really important to be done more than one time. So if I come once and I change your air filter, that's nice for you. But the reality is most of us need to be changing our air filter, 3 to 4 times a year. So by doing a seasonal package, I'm able to keep your windows clean by doing those 3 to 4 times a year. I'm able to change your air filter out 3 to 4 times a year. And it goes back to that holistic approach of taking care of your home with a more complete package. We aren't to a subscription model yet, but we are looking at getting there. The franchise is getting that in place. So
Yeah.
I think that will be an option that we're going to be able to offer our customers in the near future that I'm really excited about. And I think it'll do a lot um, for our customers and the franchise both.
It's interesting, Rob. When you talked first about joining a franchise and sort of walking into a playbook, I thought to myself, here's a guy who's built his entire career on creating efficiencies and stuff. But actually, you purchased a franchise that really didn't know your market yet. And so
Yeah.
you're also getting a little bit of the entrepreneurial piece where you're getting to dig in and flex those muscles in a way that benefits not just you, but other franchisees who are joining.
Yeah, and like I said, that was one of the exciting things that I came across when, you know, I knew when I was coming in where the franchises started, right? It was that um, along the California, Texas. I knew I was going to be in the Midwest. I've traveled at least enough to know to kind of how the homes are different, and I knew there's going to be a lot of changes that came from that. So that is one of the things that really excited me was I was going to be part of developing this franchise and how we operated and how we could create a more complete service for people in the Midwest. And I've absolutely done that. There's been several services that I've really driven and changed and created for Home Smiles here that they weren't offering before, and has absolutely affected other franchises. There's several other process improvements that I've been able to change and implement and has really affected the other franchises and really strengthened their revenue streams in other areas. So, I'm pretty proud of that and kind of those changes that I've been able to make. And like I said, some of these others that I think are coming is what I enjoy doing as part of it on, that management side of things that I can do, and improve the company. So, yeah.
Yeah, are you seeing in the franchise that there are people with other skill sets around the marketing side, for example, that are also helping support you in different ways that make you more successful because they're using their expertise to bring to bear things that are
Yeah.
becoming more
Yeah,
effective?
no, and that's one of the exciting things as we grow. Like I'm like franchise number 15, right? So I
Yeah.
have, we have, I think 45, 46 operating right now. It changes every month. But we're growing and it is great. We're bringing in new people with new skill sets. We all have very different backgrounds. Um, I was really the first big operational driven franchisee into it, which is part of the reason why I've been able to drive a lot of changes in those areas. But now as we have brought on some people that are in marketing. I talk with an individual just as like I did the research. We've got a couple coming in. I've been able to talk to that are looking at coming into the franchise that have backgrounds in real estate, backgrounds in, and, several with those, right? Several with backgrounds in marketing that I think are going to be a huge help to me. And one of the great things about a franchise is you're not alone, right? I've obviously have the corporate group that
Yeah.
we rely on and work with, but I have a network of several other franchisees that I call and talk to all the time. And, a lot of it may just be we're venting our own frustrations with each other, um, about the market or
That's
where
helpful
we're at.
too.
Yeah. But we're able to help and give each other our unique skill sets to kind of refine our own businesses, right, and improve ourselves. So that is another aspect of it for sure. That's been nice.
Any specific examples for you that come up when you think about something you got from another franchisee that just was really pivotal in your business?
Yeah. So some of it was just understanding. So like when the business was formed, they're like, this is how you do this process. Well, I knew it wasn't necessarily going to 100% work that way here. Um, but Jorge's been great. And he's a great example for us too. Right? He was a loan officer that's very successful in California, but you know, his back, they worked him to death, and it was affecting his health. And he made the change, became extremely successful. But he didn't know operations, but he has spent so much time, and he's one of the originals. So I've been able to call and lean on him, and I had all these great ideas. I'll run into a building and I'm like, man, I think I know how I want to tackle this issue. Usually it's like say a gutter issue on a 4-story building. I have a really powerful vacuum that I can use that I can get 3 stories with, but it's like it doesn't really work at 4 stories. That's really where the power comes, so I'll pick up the phone, call Jorge, and I'm like, hey, so how would you tackle this? Because you've got the experience. Like, what has your team done to do this? And he's like, we actually have a leaf blower that we connect to ours. Instead of the vacuum, we reverse the process, hook this really, pretty powerful leaf blower to it, and we'll blow everything out. And then you can use the vacuum if you need to. You don't have as much suction, but you've got 99% of it out there, and you can just finish it off that way. That's been it's just operational stuff like that. I've reached out to him a lot. The other thing that they've really helped me out with, him and Greg, when you first start, you're really nervous. Like, how do I bid out this commercial job? I'm walking into and I've got an apartment complex that wants me to wash all their windows, and I'm like, well, okay, I'm doing the math in my head. I think it'll take this much time. I'll need this much supplies, but when you're first starting out, I haven't had the background of that kind of, sales or putting together projects of like that scope in this way. And it's been really great to lean on those guys and some other individuals that, depending on what it is and what their expertise were, that I've been able to call and, put together quotes that make me competitive. But also I don't get myself into a position where I way underbid myself and I lose my shirt because I can't, I lose money on the job, which you absolutely got to figure out how to not do that, right? As a new business owner, you can't lose money early on. So,
Yeah. So it sounds like the other franchisees have been really helpful. Was there anything you learned in the due diligence process when you were calling out? You said you used it to validate whether they could make money. How did you do that? Like, what questions did you ask or?
sure. Well, a lot of it's, I have an operations background. I have a pretty good idea of how things work at the ground level. I can understand how to calculate labor. I can understand how to calculate, the equipment cost and the drive times and all those kind of things. But I really needed to know, you know, where were the profit margins? What made this business actually work, right? Because it's a 95% of my cost is labor. So getting that wrong can have really bad consequences against it. And the other part of it too is like understanding, where's my risk with this, because you got to be able to mitigate risk. The military teaches us not to be risk adverse, but you need to mitigate risk at point, right?
Yeah.
Um, you can't shy away from it. It's always there. So, it was really talking with them and getting comfortable about what are the things I don't know that I need to know to be successful, and talking with them and understanding like, okay, this is really where the cost is. This is really where my expenses are going to come from, so that when you're working through putting together your business model, and this is what if I'm going to move my price points to this, right? And I build up my pricing model that it still makes sense that for what I need to pay my employees, that there's still a profit margin there to be my business to be successful, right? And to understand as my employees get better, that will get better, and just help me understand where's the risk, right? That if I get into these type of things, like this is gonna increase my labor considerably. So, I spent a lot of time talking with them, talking about what made them successful, what's their challenges. Um, Especially when you deal with multifamily, it gets really kind of crazy in the things that you end up, walking into and running into. So I had no backgrounds and reference off of that. So I did spend a lot of time trying to understand, because it sounds simple, right? Like, oh, we're going to go clean the gutters for this apartment complex. But the reality is you run into like, well, they only want it done during these times. Or you run into like, it has to be done, this specific way. And if you don't do it this way, then, you're going to lose the job. And there's ones where we go inside the homes and we clean dryer vents, and you run into all kinds of crazy stuff that you just need to know to be ready for and plan appropriately, so that you can mitigate those things to help keep your cost in line, so that
Yes.
the business model I put in place is as close to reality as possible, right? Because when you first do it, everybody's going to sunshine and rainbows, oh, you've only got to do this to make a profit. And, that's not I know enough to know that's not the reality. So I got to figure out where's the reality from my conversations with the FDD and Perspecta and making that work versus I need to talk to a franchisee that's out there actually doing this. And does that really match um, what I'm working with on the corporate side that's trying to sell me the franchise? 'Cause at the end of the day, right? They're trying to sell me something too. They
Yep.
may want me to be a part of their organization, which, I truly believe they did, but they are still trying to sell me something. So I need to use that to make sure I'm deconflicting everything that I'm getting involved in what I think I'm getting involved in. So
Yeah, it sounds like the big thing you were trying to understand with the franchisees is to de-risk the unknowns. Just tell me where
yeah,
all the bodies are buried, guys. Which of these jobs are am I not even thinking about are going to be major problems, and how should I be thinking about them differently? I'm
yeah.
curious with your background, though, what other risks did you think about or identify? And let's walk through what you thought those risks were and your sort of thinking on how to mitigate those.
Well, and that was the so with my background, I knew I could make the process more efficient. Like I mean that's what I've spent the majority of my career doing. So like I was trying to look at that and see um, what was most beneficial. Um, Trying to look at the risk. It was like, what equipment were we using? Was it the right type of equipment? Um, One of the things and I agreed to this early on, I agree. When you buy a franchise, you buy something that works and you buy a system that works. The equipment, the playbook, the marketing, like, okay, I'm going to buy into that. We'll go with that and we'll see what we need to tweak along the way to make it work. So that's really, I did go into it and look at it. It's like, I know we're trying to do this. Some things were a little bit out of the scope of my knowledge. So I've spent, I don't know, countless hours doing research in certain areas. And, you know, um, there are better ways to do things and we've made adjustments since then. So that's really kind of what I was looking at in regards to that and the improvements that can go and, mitigating risk also, right? Um, One of the things they spent a lot of time with that. So, our founder, Jess, was a really pretty successful a real estate attorney, right? So really, the whole company was originally founded to mitigate risk for a lot of those. That was one of the founding principles. So a lot of that had been done. I just needed to know and understand it to be comfortable with it too, right? So
Yeah. And so it sounds like a lot of mitigation on the tactical issues you can run into when
yeah,
operating these jobs. I'm curious when you take a step back and look at the broader risks for you of
yeah,
jumping into business ownership, what were some of the big things that stood out? And walk us through, as somebody who thinks about risk all day in your operational jobs, how
yeah.
did you think about it? What did you do to prepare?
So I mean, I guess there's two sides to this really. So to answer it more directly in your can't like question with operational side of things, it's one of the number one first processes that I changed. We were pressure washing homes. Um, and that's a huge risk. Like I'm going to give up an employee 4,000 psi wand. The minute it hits siding, you're likely to separate it. If you hit windows with that, the gas will
You're
escape
great.
out. Now there's the efficiency. Now I'm repairing replacing windows, repairing siding. Um, and I was like, no, I'm done with this. Like I'm not going to pressure wash another house. There's just too much risk and not enough benefit to it, and it's just hugely labor intensive, which led me down the road of, and I found out and researched what's called a soft washing techniques, where at a very high level, right, you're using a solution to clean the home, and you're using a higher volume of water and lower pressure. Um, and the more I researched and the more training I got into it, the more I was like, this is 100 times better way to do this. It saves me time and labor, it saves me cost, and it mitigates risk. And at the end of the day, it actually will deliver a better product for the client and a better outcome, right?
Yep.
There's things that I can clean with soft washing I can never do with pressure washing. And so I'm able to meet my customers' expectations at a higher level than I was before. So that was one of the big things early on that I did. Um, some of the other things just came down to training that I got into and teaching my guys, like, if you see these kind of things, learning to watch for power lines and, fiberglass ladders and, those are all the pretty straightforward and simple things you look for. When you're like, I'm going to do a hot water heater flush, you know, you've got to survey and look at the area of what you're doing and make sure, one, you have a place for all of that water to go correctly. Because a lot of ours, we having basements, right? When I first got
Yeah.
trained in California, slab on grade homes, you're just like, you just wash it out the garage, just goes out. So, but if I'm going to do one in basement, I need to know and make sure ahead of time that that drain down there is clear. That if I go open up a hot water heater, that water has somewhere to go, and I don't turn their basement into a swimming pool. You
Yeah.
know, um, so it's or if I see these, if you see high level of corrosion, around that pressure relief valve, like we need to back off, and this may not be the right thing to do with this water heater. We could end up doing more damage to it than actually good. So there was things that I kind of moved to another level and really kind of helping teach and develop my employees as we go forward. And it's a great thing that gives me a chance to communicate with my customers, right? So they know what's going on with their home. I can flush a hot water heater and realize, hey, your anode rod is shot. We might need to replace your anode rod. Hey, your smoke alarm is at the end of its life expectancy. One of the things that you'll learn and
And
be
it's going to
educated
go
about.
off at 3 a.m. in the morning, always.
Well, and you realize, like, we all go test it, right? We press the button, and
Yep.
all that really is a battery interrupter to know if your battery's working or not. The actual plate that detects smoke oxidizes over time. So if
Oh,
your smoke alarm is over 10 years old, that plate is overly oxidized, and now it's actually becoming less and less effective, and it gets wonky. That's where you start seeing like humidity will set it off, or weird little things with the slightest bit of smoke and from the kitchen may set it off. Things that it shouldn't necessarily set them off. It just acts weird, and it's time to replace them because eventually it's just not going to work at all. And now the thing that you counted on keeping your family safe and your home safe now doesn't work as well as you do. And all you really knew to do was test the battery interrupter. So we educate our clients on that and make sure that they have what they think they have and it's performing the way that it's supposed to perform.
got it. That was a good example you gave in terms of the risk of the pressure washing and how you found a different
Yeah.
path. I'm curious how you thought about the financial risk. I mean, you're somebody who's been in operations, you got a
Yeah.
family, you got people that are looking out for you. I'm guessing that was a big hurdle to get over for you in terms of making the jump into business ownership. So help us understand
No,
how you thought about that.
it was, and a lot of that would had to be just a leap of faith. Like, and I got an amazing wife. We've been able to kind of support ourselves off of her income and the savings that we've had at this point. Um, we kind of really had to look at that and make sure we were in line to be able to do that, and that we were um, getting the business to get it in the financial shape that it needed to take care of itself during this transition time. Because that's a huge risk, right? Because we sit down and you put a perspective together. All right, this is what it takes to generate revenue, have positive revenue flow. Like I said, and I talked to several of the previous franchise owners about how they got their business going, when did they break, have a break even as far as monthly positive revenue flow. Um, but one of the things that I found was, those guys have been established for several years. The slow growth, right? That goes in. I didn't have a whole lot of people to call to be like, yeah, this is my second month. So that was a big risk that I had to take, and we just had one of those things I kind of had to take a leap of faith, and it's definitely one of the things that we struggle with still is as we go through and come to the Midwest and we're creating, you know, a whole new business model for people to work with. I'm happy to go clean somebody's gutters, and if that's all I do, that's great. But that's not my competitive advantage, and that's not what helps my business thrive. When I can come and take care of their home holistically, I can do many, many services at one time cheaper than they can call those out individually. And I can ultimately save them money, but that's not how people initially look at and take care of their homes.
Yeah.
So that was a big risk, and knowing that I could make that conversion, and that's been a little bit of a struggle, but we're getting there. Um, we had some struggles early on, especially with Google and getting verified and making it all the SEO stuff work correctly. In fact, we've had a major shift this year in our SEO, and we're seeing some positive movement from that because that's ultimately the thing, right? I can tell you all day, I could go do 5 jobs a day and I will have this revenue income and we'll be, sitting great and, money will never be an issue, but that's not the reality of things, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Your customers.
so my customers got to know who I am, and I've got to be able to make connections with them. And and to generate those leads. And that has been a challenge for us. And that's been a major issue that I've had to lean on other people to help with, because that is far outside of my expertise. I have no idea how to build a website, let alone optimize it so people can find me on Google. Because unless you know Home Smiles, you know, they aren't gonna find me on Google just, gutter cleaning or whatever it is that their individual services, dryer vent cleaning. They can't find me unless all that stuff on the other side is taken care of. And we had a little bit of hiccup, definitely starting off with that, and that was a large risk that we had to take. That I think we finally kind of got over that hurdle, and now we're doing better about being able to connect with those clients and figure out how to get those leads that I need to and convert those into jobs, and um, keep my business moving.
Yeah. I want to go back to the financial risk question, Rob, because I'm talking to somebody who's so operationally precise that they're deciding pressure washing is too risky. And so we need to go do some research and find a better solution. So
Yeah,
when you say, "Oh, I just took a leap of faith," I think to myself, well, I doubt that that's all that you did. So
yeah,
maybe you could talk to us a little bit about your process of how you figured out how to make that leap and try and make it as manageable for you and your family. I know it sounds like you sat down with your wife, you guys sort of reworked your budget and thought about your savings, but give us some more details on how you thought about that and making sure that you were going to be able to get this new business off the ground.
sure. I mean, I mean, operationally, I obviously kind of had that figured out. Like, I knew how long a job was going to take me. I knew what that would cost with labor. I knew what, uh, my expenditures were going to be as far as, usage. The few things that we actually do supply wise, reply, that was easy for me to calculate and figure out. It's all the other stuff. It was the insurance and the marketing and, um, figuring out that, because those are all, I mean, even a lot of those are still fixed things, but until I know, like, I can get this many jobs and get this revenue coming in from it, I need to be able to do this to cover it. And the interesting thing was, and where it was still kind of a leap of faith was, I can, we used to call it our 18-point package, was originally what it was. Like, I knew how many of those I needed to perform, but I also knew, like, that's not what people were looking for, understood. So I had to go back and look at, I've got to do this many gutters. I got to figure out this many, because I knew what my profit margins were off of individual services. So I really had to sit down and do that, and really figure that out to understand when I'm going to start bringing in revenue. And monthly layout, I ended up, most of my insurance and everything I paid annually for the price break and all that, but you're still figuring all of those things out. Like, I have to also calculate in, here's my marketing spend, here's my, um, if I think I'm going to be able, and a lot of it's still, you've got to make some assumptions. You can't
Yep.
get around that. But if I can do this level of work every month, I know I need to make sure I'm not only covering, obviously, my, franchise has royalties, right? I'm covering my royalties fees. I'm covering my labor and my expenses. But I need to also make sure I'm factoring in, hey, I'm covering the insurance, right? I'm covering what I plan to spend on marketing so I can continue to get my face out there in front of people.
Yeah.
Um, all the other little nuances of business, like some of which I didn't even know to factor in. They tell you and you look at it, and it's definitely things I learned through that exploratory process that I went into. And like I said, reason why you buy a franchise, right? I didn't know, I would have
Yep.
never known this. When you start looking and doing multifamily, you're going to go through vendor credentialing, and a lot of them are different. So I spent a lot more money than I originally expected to just getting on the vendor list, so that I could even submit a quote to an apartment complex. But trying to factor those in, and knowing that I'm sitting down and doing that, and at the end of the day, you've got to put in a factor of, you know, I'm I have to start with enough of a buffer to know that if I don't make money over the next 6 months, that this doesn't necessarily fold, right? That I
Yeah.
have to have a safety net going forward, which, obviously started with this is I knew what my monthly outlay was going to be if I perform no jobs, right? And
Yeah.
then I divide that out. I think I can do this and divide that out by the number of jobs. So I know of expending it. So I know that as I'm building my pricing model, that my pricing model covers those. those things that aren't necessarily directly tied to an individual job, all those other things that it takes being a business owner.
Yeah.
And it's kind of just sitting down and doing those calculations. And that was something I reached out to some people to help out with too, right? Like I said, I knew what it takes to manage a job and what that job was going to cost me. It was the other things that I had to help, receive a little bit more help from and make sure that, what I was doing right, what I was planning was correct. This is going to help get me on the right path. So,
Yeah, it sounds like you had some strong awareness too, Rob, that what you were looking to sell was not something that people were necessarily looking for. And
yeah,
so you built your revenue model to recognize that you're going to pull in these more direct services that then give you an opportunity to talk with someone about how to manage things differently. Because preventative maintenance, whether it's with healthcare or whether it's with your home, is just not the way that most of us think.
right. And don't get me wrong, originally, because that's how the franchise was set up, right? Where we were set up the 18 points. This is what we come and do. This is ultimately the biggest advantage we can give people. Um, so it really wasn't immediate. Like that was honestly really how I built my first business model. Um, and and it's you go through your training and everything sounds good and that's works. It makes sense to me, right? You go through the training. If I pay somebody to pressure wash and clean gutters, I've essentially already paid for the whole 18-point package. I can offer all this, but the reality is they only ever called me for one, and there's a lot of people that's especially in the Midwest. We're hard headed with some of that. We
Yeah.
all know that like I'm gonna do my own this gutters and like this doesn't really big deal. Like I just need somebody to come clean my dryer vent because I don't have the brushes. Like okay, great, awesome. I'm glad to come do that for you. Um, but it's something that I learned very quickly, and I had to adjust my business model for sure on that to account for that because I get it. You step back and once you get in the reality of the situation you're in, you realize you know what this is really what people are looking for right now. And I think that's one of the great things the shift that we did, even from the corporate level, was like, all right, the 18, if I come over and then somebody wanted, 249 to come do their gutters, let's say, and now I'm coming in there, hey, you know what? I could take care of your whole home for $800. Like that's a big upsell to ask somebody, and that's not what they're doing, and that they're not going to see the immediate advantage of it. They're going to concentrate on what that price tag was. So as we've broken it down into smaller things and more targeted directly towards the services that people have individually asked for, um, we come in like, hey, I'm happy to come in here and do this service at this level for a little bit more. We're going to add this whole package for you. If you want to start that, we'd be happy to move into it. It's a much easier upsell. It's a much easier. I don't have to go and feel like I'm trying to be some salesman selling snake oil to a client,
Yeah.
selling them something they didn't ask for. And as we move to seasonal type things, that I'm trying to pilot here, it brings that price even down a little more because I'm dividing all those services up 4 times a year. Um, and it's much easier for us to conceptualize because we know, like, I've got to get my gutters done in the fall. Hey, it's springtime. Love to have my windows done during the springtime. I'm thinking about that spring cleaning. I'm going to pressure wash your driveway in the spring. You know, it fits in our mindsets a little better. And I think it's a positive, transition that we're making
Yeah.
for the company. It's something I've been able to better make my business model around, and it's going to help me drive more revenue for my business that way.
Well, Rob, I have no doubt you're going to be successful on this path because I can already tell with your level of adaptability, that is the thing that is most valuable for a business owner, right? No matter what plan we start with, it's wrong from the get-go, and it's just a question of how quickly we can figure out where and adjust. So, really appreciate you taking the time with us today. I took a lot out of how you think about operations and de-risking. I think the example you gave of the pressure washing is awesome. You've probably done as much for many of the franchisees in that particular Home Smiles franchise concept as the franchisor, given the number of things that you shared with us. So thanks again for sharing.
I hope so. Like that's one of the things that, like I said, I really enjoy that development side of things and improving what I become a part of. It's really we do kind of think of ourselves as a family, so I'm really excited to bring that and help the others. I know several of our other franchises. That one thing alone has been a massive revenue driver for several other of our franchisees at other parts of the country because it's such a big deal around the coastlines now.
Well, Rob, we wish you continued luck as you continue to move through the process. I know you just recently got started, but I think good things are on the horizon for you.
Thanks for listening to the Create the Life You Want podcast. If you like what you heard, you can subscribe to future episodes by clicking the subscribe button, you know where. If you're an aspiring business owner, you may also want to subscribe to the Create the Life You Want newsletter for more inspiration and tips delivered to your inbox every week. You can find the link to that in the show notes, as well as on my personal website, jeremyames.com. If you've already decided you want to start or buy a business, consider exploring your financing options by heading to our sponsor's website at www.guidantfinancial.com. That's GUIDANT financial.com. See you in the next episode.